2 is enough, 1 is too few, 3 is literally odd, and 4 is too much. Hey, Matt.
Hey, Mike.
Let's do the podcast.
Okay.
All right, right now. Let's do it. Right now, not later. Now. Okay.
Nope, I'm already doing it. It's done.
Oh, cool. All right, well, thanks for joining us, everybody. Welcome to Hacking the Grepson. This is a podcast where I, Mike, talk with my friend Matt about development and programming and stuff of that nature. I got a question right out of the bat for you, Matt. Hey, that rhymed. Do you prefer working on stuff like programming, development, whatever, as a solo dev, or would you rather be in a team?
They both have their positives and negatives. I don't know that I have a preference. It really depends on what I'm doing. For a lot of reasons, solo dev, because it means I can do things on my schedule, at my pace, without anyone bugging me. And I'm thinking not just like dev, but just like anything I work on. That is kind of how I think. But also, like working on a team kind of forces me to be a little bit more accountable to what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot to be said for that. So it honestly really depends on the situation.
Okay. Well, let's talk about each of these situations, because I mentioned on the podcast that I started a new job recently. I've been there about 4.5 weeks now, and it's very different from what I'm used to. Because I would say that while I have been on teams plenty of times where I've been working on things, this is the first time I think that I have really felt like I'm doing team development instead of solo development. There's this concept in board gaming called multiplayer solitaire, where you're playing a board game with other people, but you usually kind of have your own maybe tableau or your own card setting, and you're working out a puzzle, maybe trying to do it faster than others. Maybe there's some interaction between you, but you're really like, it's sort of like everybody's playing solitaire at the same time and who can do it better. And I would say that that's kind of what my team development has felt like a lot of my career, where, yes, there are other people on the team, everybody seems to kind of have like their thing that they do. And when there's code changes that need to be made, you can kind of have a lot more free reign, because I usually have access to not only my local development, but also, a demo or development server or a staging server or even a production server to make changes if I want to. Now, of course, the team I'm on now, I haven't been there long enough. I haven't been given the keys to the castle yet. I don't even have access to touch a production server at this point, which is probably for my own good. But also, it's just after so many years of just like having super admin root power to basically everything to kind of be not that is quite, I don't want to say jarring, but it's interesting. And I'll just say this, like I'm actually reviewing like pull requests like regularly. Like my like the team lead person is giving me pull requests, like go look at this code that I did, even though in my head it's way above, the complexity that I am familiar and comfortable with in this code base. But still, like, look it over, make sure there's no obvious mistakes, and, review it, approve it, reassign it to someone else who's going to do their own testing before it goes further, all that kind of stuff. When I make commits, there was like a pre-commit hook that was part of our project where it makes sure that it's linted, and there's a stack of like front-end tests that need to pass that also get run when you make the PR on GitHub. And it's just, I got to say, it's actually wonderful. Like, it sounds like it would be limiting, but I don't know. Like, you could go either way on this. I could see how you could be like, ugh, if you know what you're doing, that's just a lot of cruft and obstacles and barriers you have to go to. I'll just do it live, But I do find as a personal dev, which is really the solo dev other side of this coin, that is how I run solo dev, where I don't have all those checks in place. And so I'm constantly just breaking things because I'm just touching anything and everything without any real checks. And so I'm actually really loving working in this team, having all those layers that I feel like it's already making me a better programmer, like within a few weeks, which it's taken this long to get here. And I feel a little sad that it took this long, but it's just everybody works differently and everybody has their project set up, at a certain level of this, like there's many layers that you can put on top of a project. In between, I am writing code, I make a commit to a repo, and it is seen on a production server. There's a lot of layers that can go in between, and I'm just not used to having a bunch, and now there are a bunch. So I don't know, what is your experience with this over your career, Matt?
Well, interestingly, my current job and the last year or so of my job at my last company involved writing a lot of the CI and CD systems, which are all those checks and balances that you're running. That's CI,
Matt, and people
right?
like you.
Continuous integration. I don't love writing it, but it's so necessary, and it helps you it helps prevent people from making stupid mistakes, right? Like you've progressed to this point in your career, you basically know what you're doing. But maybe you fat fingered something. Maybe your cat jumped on the keyboard when you weren't looking. There's all these things that could happen. And so having checks just saves a lot of headache, because the earlier you detect a problem, the less effort it is, which means less costly to the company, which is why someone pays me to do this. Yeah. And so you should catch it early. I mean, when I do my own personal development, I don't tend to have a full-on CI system, but I do everything in like Git hooks and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So a commit hook, a push hook, and they'll do different things. But those are small, so the running something like linting or type checking or a build and running a bunch of unit tests is nigh instantaneous. But, when you get into a code base that is several gigabytes large, if you make a change somewhere, it could take a while. Some CI systems I've worked on take an hour to run, which is obscene, quite frankly. But when you get to that level of complexity, you want something automatically kind of checking your work and making sure you're not making a mistake. You're all right, this is all a good idea. And I test all my stuff locally anyway when I write code, but you're usually testing things in somewhat of an isolated area. You're okay, I changed this file, so I'm going to test things around this file. But then there's someone that uses that, someone that uses that. Oh, and there's this other package. And now I'm in a monorepo, so there's all these other packages. And suddenly your one little change has unintended consequences. And the only way you're going to find that out is through testing, generally. So that's my opinion on the CI side of things.
Yeah, well, no, you bring up the monorepo part because what I'm working in is a monorepo. And I guess
I despise monorepos.
I guess I never worked in one before because I guess I didn't really understand what it meant to have something like that, because normally the things that I've worked on, I guess, have never been complicated enough to need this kind of structure. But yeah, it's different, and I'm just trying to be, working with a team that already has this system in place and coming into it. Normally if I were starting my own project, or if I was the only person writing the code, for a small system or a small project, how I do things doesn't really matter as long as it makes sense to me. But when I come into a large code base like this, I definitely am okay, let's just look at some code that's been written. Let's see how they're writing it. Let's see what conventions they're using. And, I'm someone who just likes to fit in. So I want to a certain extent, as long as they're not, using 8 spaces for their tab size or something insane like that, I'm okay with. Yeah, I'm okay with what they're doing. I've noticed this when I work in web dev, because you're often touching a front and a back end language, and there seems to be the convention for tab size in JavaScript or HTML versus PHP is not always the same. I find PHP, if you look at stuff written by, say, the Symfony core or the Drupal core team, that they use 4, and I'm a proponent of 2. 2 is enough. 1 is too few. 3 is literally odd, and 4 is too much. But it's also one of those things where like, okay, if 4 is too much, that could just mean that your functions and classes are too complicated. Like if you're having to indent that many times and you can't fit in like an 80 character standard or even 100 character width, then that's kind of a code smell. So I can see that, but just as long as it's consistent, you know. So anyway, those are the kinds of things
I like 4 spaces personally.
Have you always been like that, or did you switch?
No, I was very much a 2-spacer for most of my coding career, and I'm not sure when it switched over, but at some point, it was like, you know, I was conforming to the code standards in the repo that I was working in, and so they all used 4, and I'm sure I was annoyed by it at first. But after a while, I got used to it, and I find it easier to read things with 4 spaces now. I can glance through it. There's much less that my eyes have to parse to figure out, like, oh, is this a wrapped line?
Right.
Or is this actually a new line and then spaces? Now, VS Code and the like pretty columns and stuff that it does helps with that tremendously, and maybe I don't need the 4 anymore. But I got used to it, and I still read my code in Vim half the time out of habit.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, yeah, whenever, like, at my old job when I was constantly SSHing to servers, yeah, I would read everything in Vim. I haven't gotten to that point at this job yet. It's still all VS Code, so I'm sticking to 2 for now. But I wanted to know, like, are there any downsides you can think of to having to go through all the checks and balances for making a code change? Like, I mean, obviously, as the complexity gets bigger, it feels more required just because there's too many things for your brain to keep in your head. But, like, are there any obvious downsides to that, like slowing down the process or causing more problems? Like what?
Okay, so when you're working with multiple people, right, one of the most important things you can do, in my opinion, is keep your repository in a buildable state. Like, it should work. Really, you want it in a releasable state, but I will accept a buildable state, right? And that's something I do. Like, I use pull requests on personal development for this reason, or at least feature branches. They end up being one and the same, just the way I end up modeling everything the same way, just so I don't have to overthink anything. But so I use pull requests in general, and so that way I can have broken builds that only affect me, even if I'm the only one working on it, but it only affects me. So if something comes up and I need to jump over somewhere else, I can. So I really like that aspect of pull requests and that the idea of keeping things in a working state. And so where something like CI can become a problem is if you enforce that, which I think you should. There are situations, especially if you have a long running CI process, like some of the things that I work on today. Like I said, I've seen ones that take an hour. I've built ones that take an hour because the tests take that long. If someone manages to get something in there that breaks anyway, right? Because things happen, maybe a dependency somewhere else changed in the time between the time you ran your CI checks and the time you merged or whatever. Now the repository is broken, and it's broken for everybody. And that sucks. And if you know what's wrong, you want to be able to roll that back, and you want to roll it back quickly. And if you have to sit there and wait for the entire CI process, that can be problematic. So in all my CI systems, I tend to build in blockers, but I also build in escape hatches so you can get out of it. Right? It's like, okay, in general, we're going to run this entire thing, and if anything fails, you can't merge. Right? Great. Except if you really need to, you can do this other thing, and you can make that more or less complicated. I've gone from making it like literally go in and edit your settings we use Bitbucket, but like GitHub or Bitbucket for the actual project settings, to now I have a bot that you can run everything through, and so it keeps like audit logging and stuff like that. There are disadvantages. The other one I've seen in kind of that same vein is if you need to keep, if you want to keep your system functional and there's a lot of people working on it, realistically, you want to pull in everyone's changes before you merge yours to avoid the situation that I just described
right.
In the previous example. But if everyone's merging and it takes an hour to run, you can get into a situation where you can't get your change in because you keep trying to get the latest, and then you have to wait an hour. And then, and every time you do that, that can build up. And there's solutions to all that. Those are edge cases that, quite frankly, should not be. We shouldn't be building things like that. I think the other problem I would say that can pop in from this, outside of the whole like keeping things working, code reviews, right?
Yeah.
No one likes doing code reviews. No one likes having to have their code reviewed. I'm sure somebody does. I have never met anyone that likes either side of this. And in fact, I've worked for far too many companies. Thankfully, not the one I work at today. That code reviews are required, and no one actually does the review. They just it becomes a checkbox. Like someone's just like, yeah, go do it, and that's more dangerous than not doing a code review, because it gives you a false sense of security. And I think that code reviews are kind of a double-edged sword. You have to now wait for another person, which slows you down. And I personally, and I know a lot of developers like this, I need to get this thing off my plate so I don't have to think about it anymore, so I can move on to something else. I'm usually working on 2 or 3 things at once, but if I have a particularly complicated thing, I need to get it out of my head.
Yeah.
And so if I'm sitting there waiting for code review comments, which is a very asynchronous process and it can be very slow, I don't like that. I personally prefer design reviews to code reviews, but that's something that is a battle I have never won in 20-something years.
Is that more, like, explain what's the difference? I've never even heard of that before.
So a design review typically would be done before you start coding. And it's like, here's how I'm planning on solving this problem. Here's kind of my class structure if you're using classes, and here's the different microservices if you're doing that kind of thing, or here's what's going to be on the front end versus the back end versus the database, right? Like here's how MVC is split up. Mm-hmm. I like that because something I hate out of code reviews is, all right, I wrote all this code, it all works, everything's great, and someone comes in and says, you know what? I don't like the way you wrote this. You should restructure this whole thing.
Yeah.
And what I've learned to do in those situations is to say, okay, I will refactor this in the next PR. Mm-hmm. I will submit this one to get it off my plate and in there, and the code's working, and then I'll fix it and I'll submit another one, because it's too easy to lose momentum in those cases.
Yeah, I will say that at this job, I definitely for the first time have like multiple branches going that have changes that I've made that are sitting in a PR that needs to be discussed or needs to be reviewed. And that's completely different than how I would normally do my solo development, which is, well, one, I probably wouldn't use branches at all because I'm terrible, and I just make commits, and if I break something, then I just make another commit that fixes it. I unfortunately have plenty of commits that are like, okay, I fixed the thing. Okay, no, I fixed the thing really. Okay, this time I really fixed that thing, and once again, though, it's me. Like, as long as it works for me and I'm happy with it, part of me is almost like, why do I even do most of my solo development projects in Git, except just because I've always done it for the last 20 years, because I almost never go back to like a super old commit or anything like that.
I'll tell you why you do it.
Why?
Because I have been coding longer than you, pre-Git. Pre-SVN, even. We used to use CVS, and before that, RCS. Mm-hmm. And before any of that stuff, I used FTP as my backups. And you don't want to do that, because suddenly you have no... You type the wrong command once, and now you have no files, and you accidentally pushed the no files to your backup, and so now your backup has no files. That's why you use Git. You're not going to go into like individual commits necessarily, especially on like a smallish project. But having version control is super important for when you make the inevitable screw up. Also, it should prevent people from having to just like comment out giant blocks of code and committing that. There's no reason to do that in a version controlled system. Because I still do it, but there's no
So do
reason
I.
to do it.
Yeah. Well, another thing I just wanted to say in favor of team dev, which I'm, like I said, it's new to me, this level of it, but I am a big fan, is even though PRs and, having to have someone review your code does slow the process down, it lets me see how other people write their code, and it allows me, it's like, it's just, you're made better when you see how other people work. And, we're not pair programming, which I'm not, I don't think I would be a huge fan of. I've never really done it.
I do not like pair programming.
Yeah. Well, it's like slow pair programming. It's like very slow asynchronous pair programming because, I'll have this PR, I'll look at the code, I'll make some comments, they'll respond to the comments. Sure, all of that could have been done in real time if we were just in the room together looking at it. But I feel that there's this concept came up at this job too of deep work, where you should block off time, where you like have a solid like 4 hours where there's no meetings and no one's interrupting you, and you can because it takes a while to kind of get in a flow and then make stuff happen, and then have some come out of that flow. But if you can only manage like 10 to 15 minute chunks, it's much harder to get that done. So I'm learning about that, and
I have a question about that. If you
sure.
don't mind me interrupting you.
Yeah.
I have worked in enough jobs where I'm frequently brought into meetings and whatnot. So it's like so much where it fills up my calendar that I have to block off time in order to have any dedicated focus blocks. And I find that having to schedule that does not work for me.
Really?
I can't say. I have to be in the right mood to write code. I just do. I've never been able to not be that way. I have to be in the right frame of mind, and I can't put myself into that frame. I have to be in it, which is why I hate meetings so much. There's several other reasons, but that's the main one. Is they're scheduled, and if I'm like, now I'm in the right place, I can write great code right now. Yeah, like let's have a status meeting. It's like, no, that breaks my flow.
Yeah.
So
no, I mean,
what I want is to say, do not disturb from now until I'm ready.
Yeah. I haven't scheduled any deep work blocks yet because I also have never really thought about programming that way. I think I'm actually a lot like you, where just sometimes I'm in the mood and the problem solving energy is flowing, and I don't know why. Like I just get inspiration, and yeah, it's very hard to schedule that ahead of time. But I suppose it's a skill that you can force yourself to learn if you just do it like over and over and over again, to where your brain like doesn't know any different. It's just like, oh, it's blah time on blah day, it's time to code. I don't know. Maybe you can do that, maybe you can't. But
there are plenty of neurotypes where that's not a thing. Right? Like
okay.
the whole executive dysfunction thing.
Yeah.
Basically, if you're neurodivergent, that's going to be a problem for you.
Okay.
And it is. Congratulations, me.
I mean, thankfully, regardless of that, like so far this team is very good. The way they run the project is very nice, and I'm very lucky to be in a project that is run so well, and all that legwork of setting up the testing and the CI and all that is done. And so I didn't have to do any of that, because it is a lot of work, as you said. And I think because of that large amount of work, especially when I'm a solo dev or someone in a small team where that's not a big priority, then it doesn't happen. And it's hard to get myself inspired to make that infrastructure. Like you got to have like the shared incentive that, yes, we all believe this is a good thing, even though it's rough. It's kind of like documentation. Most people don't like writing documentation, but when you have good documentation, it's invaluable. It's just, there's a huge lake of fire that you often have to cross to get these kinds of things. And so like, I'm super lucky that this project has that, because I know there are other projects in this company that are not quite that far along for whatever reason. And I know they'd like to get there. And so, like I said, I feel very lucky to be on this team that runs that way, that I can benefit from it.
I think this is one of the places where something like Ruby on Rails or other projects that have scaffolding associated with them really come in handy because they will set up a lot of that for you. It's a little bit more local, but you can easily extend that idea and say, okay, I'm setting up a new project and have it set up the CI for you. And it could be empty. Like I have a project I work on at work right now. Its CI it just runs a build and makes sure that it doesn't break.
Yeah.
Because I do that locally, but I'm on a Mac and it's going to actually run on a Linux container. And so having it build in the real place is useful.
Yeah. I think
and getting to that point, I think that's where I see AI being useful, is taking care of that crap for me.
Yeah. I mean, we're using, for the front end, we're using Ember.js, which I had never used before, although it's been around for a while. And yeah, when you do like a new Ember project, like it sets up a lot of that stuff for you. It sets up a CI, which, like you said, is just kind of a basic build and push to a thing to make sure that it doesn't break. And it encourages you, like when you create a component, it creates the test along with it. So it's like, I don't even have to think about writing that, because before I would have to like think, oh, I made this thing, I need to also write a test for it. But if it's just part of the structure, it's amazing how much that gets you just having that part of the system. And so, I mean, I don't know if Ember is special in the JS world for that. I think testing and CI and infrastructure is just like much more important now than it ever was. So it's just more part of everything you do. And I'm just like, I'm here for it now. So, I was going to, just to wrap this up, I was going to compare this whole thing to why bureaucracy, which is usually seen as a bad thing, can be useful. Because I kind of see this infrastructure as bureaucracy. Yes, it slows things down, but it also like hopefully makes you really think about the change you want to make. Slower changes, fewer changes, but hopefully more impactful changes rather than like the whole fail fast, fail early kind of a thing that I normally do as a solo developer, which is fine when it's just me and it's my dinky little project, but not when it's like a whole infrastructure that, I don't know, thousands of people are using. You can't, it's much harder to run that crazily in it. So I'm ready to do this for a while and see how this works. So I'm enjoying it.
I'm glad to hear that. It's, one of the reasons I think we call it software engineering and not just like programming is because you need that rigor of that comes along with like traditionally when we talk about engineering, most people think of it as like hardware, right, or building things, and you want that rigor there. But it's true in software as well. Like there's a process to it, and following it is good as long as you're not just following the process for process's sake. They have a reason to be there. Great. If they don't, get rid of them.
Yeah. I almost thought you said sufferware development, and I was going to make a great joke about that, but you didn't say that, so never mind.
I think I've written that before, too.
Nice. Any final thoughts about solo versus team, besides they're both good? Nice, neutral, non-committal answer.
I'll tie it back into improv. Improv's a team sport. I like that aspect of it. You can really get to more interesting things when you work collaboratively with people than if you're off by yourself. Your imagination will only take you so far. Bringing in other people, like you said earlier, like seeing other people's codes like that teaches you new things, but also it can inspire you. Be like, oh, I like that idea. I can take that over here. So I like working on a team.
Yeah. I would also say, I also want to say that everybody is very positive, and the culture seems to be very big on like recognition and saying like, hey, thank you for your input, or that was a really cool thing you do, and like calling it out at meetings, like with higher ups and stuff like that. Like I'm not saying that like that kind of thing never went on before, but it just seems like a very core value of this company. And so that's just cool to see. So I can only give myself so many pats on the back when I'm solo developing. So it's nice to have other people do it too sometimes. Awesome.
Agreed.
Okay, well, that'll wrap up this episode of Hacking the Grepson about solo versus team dev. Try one, try both. See what flies. If you want to listen to more discussions online from our Hacking the Grepson team, you can go to hackingthegrepson.com. And we try to put out an episode every other week on Wednesday. And until next time, we now return you to your regularly scheduled lives already in progress.
Bye.